Oh, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out to this event. And I know everyone's had lunch and you're sitting there, you're probably tired of sitting at this point, but thank you for your time. So, as mentioned, I've worked at Sait for a while. I've worked with vehicles for quite a long time in the industry. I probably know 20 some odd years now, however long it's been. And everyone's talking about EVs and all the scary changes that are happening and the fear mongering. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do with these electric cars? We're not prepared. And so with that, I just want to talk about EVs versus ICE vehicle repairs. So when we talk about internal combustion engine vehicles versus EVs, what does that mean for us in the collision repair industry? And so again, it's that fear mongering of, oh my gosh, we've done it this way for so long. EVs are coming in, we're not prepared, we have no idea what to do, we don't have the equipment, we don't have the training. It's so scary. But what I'd like to do is just take some time today to talk about reshifting our focus a little bit away from the fear-mongering, away from all the scaries that happen with that, and focus on the commonalities between what we've been doing for a long time, and a lot of cases doing really well, and what that has to do with EVs. So if we have a look in this room right now, we've got 3 beautiful electric vehicles in here. And at first glance, if you didn't know much about vehicles, you may have no idea that these are electric vehicles, which tells us that there's a lot of similarities between them. They have bodies, wheels, something that makes them go forward and backwards. They have electrical systems and a whole host of other things inside of them. And when we look at what our trade is really about, our trade is about repairing the bodies and structures of vehicles. And again, when we look at these vehicles, although each of them is unique in their own way, they have bodies and structures made of different panels, different materials, which is really no different than what we've been doing for a long time. Now, I'll be repeating a few common themes from earlier today. For example, the history of electric vehicles, there's nothing new. But I will talk about numbers. Right here it says that about 1/3 of vehicles on roads in Canada we're at one point, in the US, we're at one point EVs, and this is going back almost 100 years. By comparison, today, with everything that's been going, in Canada, we're at about 8.6% market share as of the first quarter of this year. So at one point in time, there were way more EVs on the road, as others have presented earlier. So getting into this, I want to talk about safety, because of course that's a really important factor with any vehicle, but especially with EVs, there's definitely some inherent risks and concerns with the vehicles, with the batteries, and that has to do with the energy storage. And so when we look at EVs, it's that concern of, well, what happens if something happens to the battery? And again, there's been some great comments earlier today about that. But when I'm getting into the safety part here, we want to take a really good consideration into the inherent dangers of internal combustion engine vehicles as well. Like we have this Ford van here, which has gasoline in it, presumably. That also has inherent risks and dangers. Similarities, yes. Some differences in the specifications, absolutely. And so one thing that I like to kind of consider is when you get an electric vehicle in and there's potential damage to that battery pack, just having a different train of thought of, okay, it's not that different, is what would you do if a vehicle came in that was powered by gasoline and it had a leaky fuel tank from a collision? Right? We treat that vehicle fairly seriously. If it's leaking gasoline, we don't want it in the shop, we don't want it around flammable explosive things. We'd probably put it outside until we could isolate that fuel leak. Electric vehicles, very similar. Of course, look into the specifications for the vehicles if you are dealing with that. And so if we take a little bit of a step back and have this macro view of electric vehicles, you'll find, again, there's a lot of similarities. It's really just the specific details that are the differences. And that brings me to my next point, which again has been stated quite a bit today, and that is OEM research. Every time we do a repair on a vehicle, we must do OEM research. This isn't an option. This isn't something that we only do sometimes. This isn't something that we only do every once in a while. For example, if you're in a shop where you're working on the same vehicle all the time, should you look up that repair every time you work on the vehicle? And I'll pick on one example here because I see this nice Ford F-150 back here. I remember, I think it was back in 2014, I was doing some Ford training on the new aluminum F-150. Again, at that time, the fear-mongering, ooh, aluminum, there's aluminum vehicles coming in. This is new and different, but in fact, aluminum's been around in vehicles for a very long time, just not in mass production. And so I remember doing that training. Okay, this is how we repair these Ford vehicles. Great. And then we did the repairs on that. Was fantastic. Unfortunately, we found out there were some issues with the repair procedures, and that with the equipment available to most shops, it was challenging to do some of these repairs. And so Ford went out and updated the procedures. And then we did some new updated procedures, found out some of those didn't always work either. Ford updated them again and again, and just like the prior presentation, updates are happening all the time. And we don't know when things are going to get updated, why they're going to get updated, etc. So it's important that every time you work on a vehicle, you look up those OEM procedures, even if you've worked on that same vehicle 100 times before. Hey, I've done this aluminum Ford box side 100 times, I know what I'm doing. Well, I can tell you right now, if I replaced a box side in an aluminum F-150, the same way I was taught in 2014, I would be about 5 or 6 updates and changes in the procedures out of date. And that's scary. And that's not even electric vehicles yet. We're just talking about a very common vehicle that's on the road, the most common vehicle on the road in our market. So when it comes to electric vehicles, again, research and OEM procedures is paramount to making sure that we're doing safe repairs. And when we talk about batteries in electric vehicles, we're so focused on those high voltage batteries because of the energy storage and the inherent dangers with that. But one thing that we overlook with every vehicle is that standard 12 volt starting battery that every vehicle has. And just as an example I want to make here is not looking at the procedures and how that can be problematic. I'm just going to question, don't answer me, but I'm just going to question, how many of you have a battery charger like this in your shop? Because if you do, I'm hoping it's there as a museum piece. I hope no one's actually using anything that looks like this on today's vehicles. So when we look at a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle that has a 12 volt starting battery, you're going to have a battery that's going to run off of 12 volts. That starts the vehicle, and at some point it's going to need to be charged or boosted. These chargers typically run about 15 to 17 volts for charging. And that's wonderful. Prior to the 2000s, these were great chargers, did what they needed to do. Many vehicles today are running AGM batteries, so absorbed glass mat batteries for the starting battery. Absorbed glass mat batteries are super common. They are in most vehicles today from the vehicle manufacturers, and they have their own procedures for charging. And in some cases, they need their own charger. And I'm not just saying a universal charger that'll charge any AGM battery, but in some cases you need a charger that's approved by the OEM, because the computer system in that vehicle is going to have a look at the battery life of the vehicle. There's monitoring systems for those batteries, and that charging that you're doing needs to work in conjunction with that system so the computer knows what's happening with that battery, how that's affecting the life cycle of that battery, etc. The charging voltage is also a little bit different. So if you're charging an AGM battery, you're usually charging about 13.6 to 13.8 volts approximately. So as soon as you charge a newer vehicle with one of these chargers and you're putting that 15 volts or so into there, you can damage the cells in the battery. And so if you're in a body shop and you're finding that you are going through a series of vehicles where you just have the luck of the draw, or darn it, everyone who brings their car in must have really old batteries because they always die in the body shop and we're replacing their batteries. I don't get it. Okay, well that's not an issue with the vehicles or the batteries in most cases. It's an issue with the tools and equipment that are not meeting OEM requirements and not following OEM procedures. And that's just a 12 volt starting battery. Again, I'm not even getting into electric cars. This is just internal combustion engine vehicles. Are we doing this correct? Because if we're not even doing this correct, why are we even having an electric car conversation in the first place? If we can't even deal with a 12 volt battery that's been around for 130 some odd years or so. So that goes again back to that importance of knowing what it is that you're dealing with and having the tools and equipment and training to do it. On the same topic, I'll bring up Tesla because everyone likes to have Tesla in the conversation of electric cars. It's kind of hard not to. I know most of you, some of the shops that you're at here in the area, and some of you, of course, are not in the auto body repair shops directly. But when we talk about Teslas, there's really only a handful of people I should be having that conversation with. And in fact, I shouldn't even be in the conversation because I'm not an expert there. But the reality is there's only 4 Tesla certified shops in the Calgary area. And if you're not one of those 4 Tesla certified shops, Tesla shouldn't even be something that you're worrying about. You are not certified with Tesla. You probably don't have the equipment and the training, the tools, et cetera, to deal with those vehicles. And if you're doing that repair, are you doing it correctly? Are you doing it safely? And the chances are probably not. There's probably some guessing involved. But if you do have the tools and equipment and training, et cetera, fantastic, good for you. But again, in most cases, we don't. And again, that might be a thought where you're saying, okay, well, you're telling me not to do electric cars or not. No, the point I'm trying to make here is regardless of what you're working on, whether it's an electric vehicle or internal combustion engine vehicle, you need to know what you're dealing with. I mean, again, I'm looking at this room at this multitude of vehicles by me. This particular van here, Ford, very common manufacturer of vehicles. Ford has their own specifications and requirements for their repairs. Now, one thing I really do appreciate with this is that many shops are already equipped with what Ford would require for repairs. However, there are some specifications, of course, that may need to be met with those, as well as training, et cetera, that people may not have. One question that I always like to ask groups of people, and again, you don't have to answer this, is do you ever get Toyotas in your shop? Okay, Toyota, one of the largest manufacturers. I bet you everyone here has worked on a Toyota at some point if you've worked on vehicles. And then one of the questions I ask then is, if we take any modern Toyota vehicle, I don't care what model it is, and we're going to do any kind of repair with body filler. If you're putting body filler on a Toyota vehicle, are you aware that you're not allowed to put body filler on bare metal? You are required to put an approved 2-component epoxy primer down first, and then your body filler. That's a Toyota procedure. If you are not doing that, you're not following OEM procedures. And so that's a concern there. And where this really bothers me, and I have a lot of respect for the previous presenter here, where it really bothers me is if you are a certified shop and you have this certificate in the office and your techs hopefully have the training and you've given them all the tools and equipment to do this. So you're that certified shop. You should know better. You should be looking at the procedures. And you're not putting the epoxy primer down before the body filler, for example. You're no longer following OEM procedures. But you're telling your customer that you are by having that certification and touting all of the stuff out there. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't care to practice law, and I don't want to pretend I'm doing that, but I have read a dictionary before, and I'm pretty sure that gets into a very scary word that starts with F and sounds like fraud. Oh, did I say that? And that's scary. Okay. I'm not saying this to shame anybody. That's totally not what I'm trying to do. The point I'm trying to make is going back and doing that research. Are we actually doing the research? Unfortunately, I think what happens a lot of times is as businesses, as shops, we pay the money for the subscriptions to the software, we get a computer, get everything that we need, and then as it comes time to repair, we just kind of let things happen, and then we see a damaged vehicle roll into the shop, and then a week or two later, a shiny vehicle roll out of the shop, and if the customer's happy, we assume everything's good. And that's happened in the industry for a long time. But the mystery that happens in this space, the shop, isn't always what's supposed to happen. Just like charging the battery. Are we doing that correctly? And so going back to my point, if we can't even charge a 12-volt battery correctly today in 2023, how can we go anywhere beyond that? So really what this is about in my presentation is just looking at the different construction of vehicles and then looking at those OEM requirements and the similarities and differences between them. Every vehicle today is different. This is the latest body style GM Chevy pickup truck. This is a picture from, I think it was 2017 when I took it, 2018, somewhere around there. And this was a big step forward in body design for General Motors with their trucks. And that's great. They've done some wonderful things. They're very safe vehicles. But the reality is, again, if we're guessing on the repairs, you have no idea how to repair these things correctly. When we get back to electric vehicles, it doesn't matter what's inside of here. If there's an internal combustion engine here, if we have a battery pack underneath, it really doesn't matter. This is all structure, all material, and each of them is unique. If we put an internal combustion engine in this, and then we take a Ford F-150 with an internal combustion engine, and we repair both of them, they are two extremely different repairs. And again, we're still just talking about ICE vehicles. We look at a Ford truck with an aluminum body. There's a lot of rivet bonding that happens in there. Contrary to popular belief, there's actually very little welding on the aluminum Ford trucks, whereas this vehicle is using a lot of weld bonding. It does use a few rivets in a few places on the steel body, and again, some very different procedures from the Ford. Again, we're still talking internal combustion engines, a lot of differences. So kind of in summary, what I'm trying to say is that EVs are not new. And a point I'll kind of make with that too is everyone talked about EVs and 100 and whatever many years ago in the 1830s, whenever they were first invented. First one was invented. Great. And then they came and they went by the 1930s. But even into the 1990s, there were EVs. I'm not sure if anyone remembers, but Ford, for a few years, I think I might even have some notes here. Yeah, between 1998 and 2002, Ford made electric Rangers. They were very limited production. I think a lot of them went to fleet. I think the U.S. Postal Service bought a bunch of them, but Ford had electric Rangers. GM followed suit and also had electric S10s in a similar time frame. You may be familiar with the GM EV1 program in the 90s. And of course, all of them basically were scrapped at the end of that. And there's a whole multitude of it. If you're a little bit of a history buff, you will remember AMC, American Motors Corporation. Very small American company, not a lot of money, but even they had electric vehicle concept, I believe in the late 70s. Now, of course, due to lack of funding, that never went anywhere, but they had produced one, tested it, and were having pretty good success with that. So again, it's not anything new. Every vehicle requires extensive research before repair. Again, that's the big point I'm trying to make here today. Research, research, research. This is a very time-consuming and expensive process. And I think that's one reason why we're not seeing enough of that being done, is there's not enough emphasis and not enough funding being put towards that. We're just kind of ignoring it for whatever reasons. And I'm going to address the elephant in the room that nobody wants to touch, and that is, well, we're not getting paid to do the research. Well, that is a very sore subject. Go in, do the OEM research. That's going to take time. You're going to have to pay for the software. Where's the best place to get OEM information? That's directly from the OEM. That is going to each OEM manufacturer's website, paying a subscription directly, and using that information directly from them, which is the most up-to-date and accurate information. Yes, that costs money. Unfortunately, everything costs money, and that's part of doing the job correctly. To me, not looking up OEM research or doing the OEM research and spending the time to do that would be like not replacing a part on a car because a part is too expensive. I don't want to buy a new frame rail because that's a $2,200 frame rail when I can just grab a torch and heat it and beat it out and straighten it. Okay, well that hopefully made you cringe, but it's not something we would do. So do that research. Bill for it. Okay, submit it to the insurance company and bill for it. Justify it. That is part of the job that needs to be done. If you're having trouble getting paid for that, you need to document what you're doing and justify that to whoever it is that is indemnifying the damage or the claim on that vehicle. And again, I'm pointing fingers at certain people here, maybe indirectly, but that is all part of the repair. And that's something that I think our industry is really lacking in. Yes, the cost of vehicle repairs are going up. That is a challenge. I don't work in the insurance industry. That's not my prerogative or business. My job is to teach people how to repair vehicles correctly, which means doing this, which means there's a cost to it, which means whoever's responsible for repairing that vehicle needs to cover that cost. Whether that's the insurance company, the vehicle owner, combination of both of them, that's something that needs to be addressed there. Every vehicle is unique, not just EVs, and that's another major point I'm trying to make. Again, whether you're dealing with two internal combustion engine vehicles, you're dealing with an internal combustion engine vehicle and an EV, doesn't matter. Every vehicle is completely unique and should be addressed as such. Lastly, OEM training is paramount to all safe and successful vehicle repairs. We cannot guess how to repair vehicles. And when it comes to OEM repairs and research, I think another misconception that happens is how little research is actually being performed in the shop. So we saw some statistics earlier stating how many shops were looking up research, but those numbers don't show how complete that research is. Because I've been into shops before where I've walked into certain shops and I see them and they're like, great, hey Ben, great to see you. We do our OEM research, this is fantastic. I'm like, cool, show me. And so they've got a vehicle that's been in heavy collision, maybe it needs a quarter panel, and they show me it and they're like, yeah, our office staff, they printed off the repair procedure or replacement procedures for the quarter panel. I'm like, good. I'm like, but where's the rest of it? And like, what do you mean? I'm like, where's the procedure for the rest of the repair? Do you know how to disconnect the battery? Very few vehicles today, the disconnect procedure for the battery is just to go poof and pull the battery terminal off. There's usually a few more steps involved. And in some vehicles, there's a whole list of steps. So where's the procedure for that? Where's the procedure for all the torquing of bolts and things? Do you know which clips and fasteners are one-time use? Did you look up those procedures? Again, there's a whole multitude of procedures. I've done some training out of the States, and in doing this, they will take average repairs in shops. They'll print off the procedures, which I don't like, because I don't like wasting paper. But they've printed them off, and on an average vehicle, they've got stacks this thick of OEM procedures for your typical repair. So if you're printing off 2 or 3 sheets of paper, I'm wondering where the rest of that stack is. Again, back to that whole point of, are we following all those procedures? Are we researching them? And are we doing it thoroughly? So again, if you're not doing that with a regular vehicle, should you even be thinking about EVs? Probably not, I hate to say it. But I'm not telling you to not do EVs. What I'm telling you to do is make sure that we're doing every vehicle thoroughly, regardless of how the vehicle is propelled. Again, I hate to make this a lecture, but I know there's a lot of great shops out there. I've been to a lot of great shops in the city. Appreciate all the hard work we're doing. We're all in this together, and I appreciate everyone coming out here and wanting to learn, wanting to be a part of a positive industry to make safe vehicle repairs for our customers. Thank you very much for your time.